Do we need management gurus? Maybe you realize that from time to time you work in an organization where often one of the leaders has one or two people they prefer to quote over and over again. If you're lucky, you don't have that. If you're in the unlucky situation that you have a boss who sends around motivational quotes, it is time to talk about the aspect of work where we have to rethink, do we need motivational or other gurus? Because surprisingly, none of these gurus ever appear in science. None of them ever won a Nobel Prize, and none of them ever changed the world for something better in a sustainable way. And we have to talk about, where does this come from? What kind of different aspects do we have? And why does this happen? And how do we do it better when we are in a leadership position? So, of course, we have different aspects of gurus. Just to give you three examples, just recently Diego Armando Maradona died, and when you see the kind of funeral they gave him, it is like a state funeral they gave to a football player in times of COVID-19, including mass gatherings. Another kind of guru is the motivational speaker Tony Robbins, you may or may not have heard about, who often has his Date with Destiny and similar programs. This year, of course, he could not meet because due to COVID-19, these large gatherings weren't allowed anywhere in any business-relevant country. So he decided to do it online. And this event had a 5-digit, if not 6-digit amount of people online sitting in their living room, singing, dancing, clapping, and writing down their goals to have a better upcoming year. And of course, we have really bad examples. And one of the worst examples you could ever think of is Mrs. Haverbeck in Germany. You may or may not have heard about her, but she has quite a followership. The person named Ursula Hedwig Meta Haverbeck-Wetzel, 92 years of age, was just recently sentenced to another jail term, which I fully support. And now you might think, what has she done? Because normally at the age of 92, you are not sentenced to, or at least you don't have to go to jail, even if you are sentenced to jail terms. What has she done that she deserved a jail term? And even I'm quite careful with what I say in this respect. What has she done that I say she deserved to be in jail? Well, she denied the Holocaust. I'm not making this up. Mrs. Haverbeck also is a member of a party called the Right. We have a party in Germany called the Left. That's a very far left-wing socialist party. And, well, they say they are the opposite. Of course, they are not. I get to that later. The Right is nothing else than a pseudo-militant Nazi movement. Mrs. Haverbeck also appeared in a TV show called The Last Nazis. Very appropriate title for her. And she already was in jail and now has another, I think, 15 months topped on that. So most likely she will be in jail for the foreseeable future, which, when you deny the Holocaust, and just to let you know, in case you didn't know, my grandfather, Josef Schoppe, they named a street after him in a city named Ratingen because he was a resistance fighter. He organized the resistance in concentration camp Buchenwald, which he survived for years. And when people like Mrs. Haverbeck say all that didn't happen, then I have very little understanding, or to be very precise, absolutely no understanding for these kind of people. The question is, why do we have so many gurus? Why do people tend that in their life they want to have some sort of guru, some sort of person that they look up to? And now, of course, we can get into details. The first one, of course, Mrs. Haverbeck, far right-wing Nazi in jail. When you are politically blinded, and you went for that followership, that cannot be an excuse for being a Nazi. Being a Nazi is an active choice. Especially when you grew up in the German-speaking world, but I think in every reasonable country, you had history lessons and you learned about what Germans have done, because the Third Reich, what the Nazis have done, is without any doubt the worst crime in the history of humankind. And it is part of the German national identity that there's an unforgivable guilt toward the Jewish community. And this will not be debated. So when you make these decisions, you simply need someone who steps up and then makes these Nazi statements in public. And you like to follow because you are driven by hate. And let's face it, especially this year during coachings, when I talked about, do you know about, let's say, dubious political misdirections in your organization? Nearly every senior leader admitted that they know about far right-wing or far left-wing. By the way, way more far right-wing tendencies in their organizations. And what have they done? Most of them did nothing. And then they said, oh, but they do a reasonable job. Well, can that be the guideline that you say, I accept Nazis in my organization because they, in your opinion, do a reasonable job? We will talk about that. Getting back to Tony Robbins, something completely different. When you want to be one of these Tony Robbins followers, and Tony Robbins is just one example, there are hundreds and thousands of motivational speakers out there. Many of these people who follow motivational speakers just want to be in a followership community. These followership communities always have very strict rules. So you have events which normally go from very early in the morning till very late at night. You stay connected via social media and different other means of communication. So you have a constant community. And of course, negativity is not allowed, one of the mantras. And then they will tell you, because negativity never brings you forward. Here are the bad news. When we look into science and someone publishes a paper, what brings the paper forward and what makes science better is people criticizing faults and errors in their research. Because then they can say, you did that wrong, please update it. And people accept the criticism because and by the way, that's not negativity, that is just mentioning facts. Criticizing something gives you an opportunity to make things better. We all remember the days, well, some of you might remember the days when someone said something is amazing, and especially in the American world, amazing has a completely different meaning. Back in the days, amazing was when you've done something which was truly outstanding. Today, the word amazing is used when you're able to forward a PDF. Congratulations for that. So when you follow one of these motivational speakers, and by the way, when you now think, oh, they do so much good, just to give you two examples, James Arthur Ray, motivational speaker and part of the package called The Secret, had 2 people dead at the end of a sweat hut event and spent 2 years in jail. I think that's reasonably bad, isn't it? Tony Robbins was the one who said that the Me Too movement is a sign of people speaking up because they want to be relevant. What on earth drives a white, straight, cisgender man to stand up in front of tens of thousands of people and make a statement like that, which simply says the female movement, the Me Too movement, is irrelevant because they only want to appear relevant, but they are not. And of course, he apologized afterwards. In my opinion, not because he thought that he's done something wrong, but he saw that the economical damage to his brand might be severe. So when you want to be in this follower status, in this community, in this everything is oh so positive and no negativity, I really don't want to be the Germans around here, but if you can't handle negativity, free enterprise really is not for you. Just limit your expectations toward life, limit your expectations toward growth, and go into your always positive communities and tell each other how great you are. There are quite a number of these communities where they give each other awards and another award, and then you step up the ladder and you work your way up. It's all positivity, and it's basically all just plain nonsense. And when we look into the example of Diego Armando Maradona, this is a typical example which we often have in sports. Fact-based evidence is ignored, but people go by the emotion rather than fact-based evidence. I'll just give you an example. Often in sales, you heard the term people decide more emotionally than in a fact-based matter, in a fact-based way, and that is absolutely true. Still, of course, especially when you are a leader, you should do the right thing, and the right thing is what is factually right and not what feels right. Maybe you remember that during World Cup in 2010, Germany met Argentina in the quarterfinals. In the quarterfinals, I hardly ever say it is very safe to say that Germany will win. But when that game came up, I simply said Germany's going to win 3-0. And I was absolutely sure. At the end, Germany won 4-0, by the way. And there is just one reason for that. Germany, especially at that World Cup, had a highly trained, specialized group of people managing the team called Die Mannschaft, which translates the team. It's their branding. So they had a specialized group of experts, all of them based in science background. Science, proof, and evidence. That drove the team. Argentina had the guru Diego Armando Maradona. They lost 4-0. They had no chance. You cannot make an organization thrive. You cannot bring an organization forward on a nice emotion. You can push them forward when you say, we have an expo coming up. We have a fair coming up where we need to be highly motivated for 24 to 72 hours. That might work. This is why often during these expos and fairs, you have the expo and fair parties. You're dead tired after 3 days, but you just pushed through and you loved it if you like these kind of expos and fairs. But you can't run an organization in the mid or long term based on just an emotion. You need more than that. Of course, now we have to think about how is it possible to do it better. So step number one, you must have a very clear political agenda, and that political agenda must be very outspoken. Very clear and outspoken. So, for example, when you have an organization, especially with the US presidential election, quite a number of companies were called out when they donated to far right-wing groups or homophobic groups or anti-trans groups or basically every non-diversity supporting group. And it's right to call these companies out, like Chick-fil-A. They were called out and they had a massive damage with their brand. Rightly so. Now they sort of changed very slowly, but they are, I think they get the idea that society is not accepting that anymore. Don't be secret about it. Make a very clear political agenda. What do you support? What do you not support? Because people want to know. And by the way, they will find out anyway, no matter how hard you try to cover it up. And of course, you are not open for extremists, especially not far right-wing, but of course also not far left-wing. Far right-wing by definition is fascist, because that's how far right-wing organizations work. And far right-wing organizations are also always enemy of the state, because they want to abolish the state and make a monocultural fascist government and put them in place. Far left-wing organization can be fascist, and far left-wing organization can be enemy of the state, but just because someone is in favor of socialism does them make an enemy of the state. I am liberal conservative, in the UK more conservative, in Germany more liberal conservative, depending on the parties. But socialism by definition is not an enemy of the state. I don't support socialism. I don't like socialism personally, but that doesn't mean it's fascist. Look into Sweden. Sweden has socialism in place, a very different interpretation than most other socialists are and have. But when you still say socialism is fascism, you really embarrass yourself and you immediately lose support of the whole young generation, because we all know that with a high amount of probability, many younger people are more left-winged, which often changes in due course of their career for many different reasons. So please accept that you must have a very clear political line, no tolerance towards extremists. Second, please accept that there are socio-cultural realities and stop giving people motivational quotes. When you say you can work your way up and there's this one person who made it, but the vast majority of all the others did not, you basically say you're all lazy, that one person's not. And we all know this is not how it works. When you by coincidence were born into a rich family, then you went to, in the UK, Eton, or in the Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and you were able to make it to these universities. Of course you had good marks, but you also had a lot of wealth and financial background to go to private education in the first place. This is nothing that you have achieved where you were only born in the right place. Don't tell people everyone can make it when science has clearly shown, especially science that put a lot of effort into proving and finding evidence how is poverty created, why does poverty happen. Science is crystal clear that not everyone can make it. So stop telling people these motivational chumbawamba phrases, because people will not follow you when you lead in that way. And aspect number 3 is evidence and science need to have priority over gurus, because gurus lead by an emotion. You can have an emotion for a day or 2 or 3, maybe a week, but then you are exactly where you were before and you still dislike what you do and you still don't trust your leaders and you still don't like the organization you work for. Do you want to be one of those leaders? Probably not. So when you want to be a good leader and a sustainable leader to make an organization successful in the short, in the midterm, and in the long run, then evidence and science is the way to go. It's not a nice show. It's often hard work to understand it, but it delivers sustainable results. I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. And for this week, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.